Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. It's March season, and that means that the Lumen patch 10.2.6 should be fast approaching. Would be funny if as I released this video, 10.2.6 just suddenly went live, I suppose. But we also got the War Within Alpha on the horizon, getting closer by the day, as it is set to release between March and April by the looks of things if we were to check the recent roadmap. And with that, we'll finally get a much needed preview of the next WoW expansion. Getting that first look at the next chapter of Warcraft will be important since it's implementing so many new gameplay systems, from its subspecs, warbands, open world endgame content, and so much more. And the more feedback we can provide in the earliest, the better, giving devs our opinions about which systems work and feel good to play with and which could probably use a little bit more work. And the community has been full of good ideas this early into development, even before anyone's gotten the chance to playtest the newest experience. In today's video, I wanted to highlight all of the best community ideas that have developed over the last few months, and some of the ways that Blizzard could make the key features of the War Within that much better going forward. But right before we get into today's video, most of you guys watching this update are still not subscribed. So if you want to get more regular War Within updates, be sure to hit the button below, and let's get into the video. Starting off, we have allied races, with the War Within adding yet another allied race as part of one of its expansion's features. There's a pretty big difference in the game between new races and allied races. The Drakthir, for example, have a flurry of new customizations, new racials, and a unique dragon model, as well as unique dragon mechanics that are only theirs, and that has been historically a thing for previous WoW expansions. But the Earthern are basically crystal dwarves, available to both factions. They have their own racials, their passives and active abilities, but they're basically an offset of dwarves at the end of the day. And that's essentially what allied races were for all of Battle for Azeroth. They're an offset of the original races, offering unique customization options, class race combinations, new passive and active abilities, unique cosmetic armor, unique mounts, unique weapons, unique questlines, but aren't as distinct as the originals, kind of like the Worgen and the Goblin of Cataclysm, the Pandarian of Pandaria, or the Drakthir of Dragonflight. Battle for Azeroth introduced a lot of these races over an expansions cycle, starting with the Maga, Orcs, and the Dark Iron Dwarfs. Later on, we got Kultirians, the Zandalari, and then later down the line, we also got Ossus Mechagnomes, as well as Valpera, which are kind of like a modified version of goblins. As the expansion went on, we got a lot of allied races since they were much easier to develop, and as there's basically a skeleton and a model and references for them to kind of make a new thing out of. The War Within could potentially follow the same path going forward, though nothing as of this moment has been made for certain by the devs just yet. The feature patches update of this expansion could potentially implement additional allied races, which would be something common to that of Battle for Azeroth cycle. One of the factions in particular for the War Within would be a rebel faction of Nerubians, way in the depths of Ashkahet. Surprisingly though, there are humanoid-looking Nerubians instead of the regular Spyro and Beetle Nerubians, which most of us are used to, which could mean that there's a small chance that these humanoids are like that for a reason, as they'll eventually could be potentially recruitable, opening up the opportunity for them to become the next allied race to join the fold, with additional allied races and factions delivered over time, similar to how Battle for Azeroth treated their allied races. Other options may include the Arathi, which we have seen very little of so far, or maybe even other allied races that are heavily connected to some of the forces such as the Void, which is looking like a very prominent aspect of the War Within. Up next we have the Warbands, which is essentially an account-wide everything system that allows you to make progress across multiple characters with new ways to manage items between all of your alts, which includes the Warband Bank, which will hold all of your reagents and other unique items that can be shared across multiple characters with multiple bank tabs included. Then we have Warbound gear, which are items that are essentially account bound, which will be weapons and armor and trinkets that are given to your main to then be shared with your lower geared alts, and are meant mostly for alt gearing purposes and aren't intended to be a direct upgrade for your already geared up main. You'll be able to put all of these items into your Warbound bank and then picked up on your alts at a later time. But besides this, we also have general account-wide progression with things like reputation progress, which can be started on one character and then finished out on another character. Transmog collections will also be added to your account instead of that character, even if you can't equip those items on that specific class. Like if you loot a plate item on a rogue, even though you can't equip it, you'll still have that item added to your collections. Flight paths will also be shared across all of your characters. Once you discover a flight path on one character, all of your other alts will know of its location. Delves, as well as delve progress with follower talents and delve locations and some of the secrets, will also be shared amongst multiple characters, as well as achievements, where you'll be able to start an achievement progression on one character, and let's say you switch over your main from a mage to a warlock, that same warlock will be able to finish out that achievement later down the line. However, what a lot of players are not talking about, which is something everybody needs in the War Within, is Warbound currency system. Dragonflight has introduced a variety of different currencies, from flightstones, crests, as well as the general upgrade system, which is generally a big bonus that most players are happy that it exists. With that system, we also get currencies which are awarded from a variety of content to reward players for tackling some of the more difficult endgame stuff, which is perfectly fine, but lower level currencies do become less useful on your main character, and at some point you don't have any use for some of the worm and even drake crests, which feels like a waste to have on a character where you have alts which could probably use them. And a lot of players would love to be able to send these items to your alts, or better yet, utilize the Warbound system to make these currencies account wide. Where my main has a lot of flightstones for crafted gear and upgrading gear, but he's already geared to the teeth. But alts don't get nearly as much playtime, therefore they have less flightstones. And it would be nice to be able to use flightstones off of your main to help out your alts get fully geared out. And by making flightstones and crests Warbound, it will follow the same philosophy as Warbound gear, which are encouraged to use your main to help gear out your alts. By making crests and flightstones also account wide, it will also do the same. Time spent on your main could mean allowing your alts to get a little bit of gear or a couple of upgrades along the way. Up next we have delves, which are a new form of open world endgame content in the War Within. To run through these quickly, there are a new form of open world activity that can be done between 1 to 5 players, and are role agnostic, lasting about 10 to 15 minutes for each adventure through Kaz Algar. There will be essentially a fourth pillar of endgame progression outside of raiding, Mythic Plus, or PvP, and are meant to be run parallel with content like raids and Mythic Plus. You won't need to do delves to be competitive for Mythic Plus or raiding, and it shouldn't feel more of a choice of how you want to progress through endgame rather than a requirement of doing all these activities just to be the very best you can be. Delves are an extension of outdoor content, with plenty of activities including combat, puzzles, platforming, exploration, and other features. Raids are mostly configured around bosses and boss mechanics, while delves are going to explore other methods and a lot of creativity to create new endgame activities for players to explore that fits that open world exploration and progression compared to the raids and dungeon content. Currently, delves will award heroic or mythic 15 gear from some of the old progression as a maximum drop, and will have a seasonal set of rewards as well, with new hats and even a new customizable dynamic flying mount, and even more seasonal rewards like raids and dungeons with every new tier. Delves have been met positively for the most part by the community. The open world and solo activities don't usually get nearly the same spotlight as some of the other forms of endgame content do. So first of all, delves have been a fantastic start to put it on paper. For many players that are playing the game now, they can't really dedicate that much time to a raiding schedule, and being able to just jump into a delve as a solo or in a smaller group of 2 or 3 players sounds just perfect to them. Though those same players that are excited for delves are hoping that this means that they can get some actual challenging or even difficult solo open world content, or at the bare minimum, content that isn't mindless and allows the players to fully utilize their entire class kit and even build out their loadouts to meet the challenge that delves present. Many players are hoping that delves will also remain a relevant form of endgame progression without becoming a simple stepping stone to real endgame content, kind of like how you start with normal dungeons, then go to heroic, then you go to Mythic Plus dungeons, and once you do Mythic Plus dungeons, there's no real need for you to go back to heroics or normals. Ideally, delves are meant to be a form of parallel progression to raids and dungeons, not a way to get into those real pieces of content after doing a couple of delves and collecting a bit of gear. This does mean that the devs have to be very careful around how they balance the rewards from delves to make sure that they're competitive enough without feeling like a lesser version of available content. At the end of the day, even solo players pride themselves on being able to play their classes well, and simply wish for content that will reward them for being very good at playing their class solo, without feeling like they're heavily missing out on the quote-unquote real form of endgame progression. Finally, we have hero talents, which are essentially an extension of the talent system, inspired by characters and fantasies of the Warcraft universe. Ideally, it is a third talent tree, separate from the class and spec, almost like a sub-spec in a way. 10 talents per talent tree, passives as well as choice nodes, and maybe even an active ability for some, similar to how artifact weapons worked back in Legion. 2 hero specs will be available per class spec, shared between a few playstyles of that class. It's a form of player power and progression without relying on a borrowed power system, which I think is a fantastic thing to see. It adds a new way of gameplay depth without destroying built-up synergies that have been developed throughout Dragonflight. And there's multiple ways of gaining power between the 2 hero specs for you to pick from, which allows for quite a bit of creativity. And they're just as flexible as normal talents. You can swap out of them anytime you want to, and you can make different builds and try different combinations, and it allows for quite a bit of creativity without making you feel like you're stuck playing just one build at a time. But for a number of players, there's a bit of a disconnect between the fantasy and the gameplay that are offered with the hero talents. And a lot of players have brought up Shadowlands Covenants as a decent example. Say for instance you are a warrior and you just love that Maldraxian aesthetic. You love the armor, the mounts, the big banner that hangs on top of your character as you ride into battle, but the Kyrian ability, both the Covenant ability as well as its passives, are a much better gameplay option in all forms of content, so you're kind of stuck playing between the themes and the visuals versus the actual better gameplay. Later throughout that expansion though, they were able to separate the two, and you could embrace the full Necrolord warrior fantasy, wearing Necrolord armor, sporting Necrolord war banner, riding a Necrolord mount, but using the abilities and the soulbinds of other covenants in dungeons, raids, and PvP. And you could say a similar thing is happening with the hero talents. Like for some players, they really want to become Sylvanas Windrunner with all of this Dark Ranger abilities and this Dark Ranger aesthetic, but are worried that maybe another hero spec will be more competitive, so while they want to have all of these shadowy Dark Ranger abilities as a hunter, they'll need to play a Sentinel or another hero spec in order to be more competitive. However, it should also be stated that these hero talents are there mostly as a gameplay first. This means they won't be like Covenants. You will not have to wait a week between switching between a Dark Ranger and the Sentinel. These are not Covenants, they're just like talents, normal talents that you have on your character right now, so you should think of them like talents when it comes to the basic gameplay as well as conveniences. Generally, players love watching their characters grow stronger and get new gameplay mechanics and abilities. Some of the better examples right now for hero talents will be the Diablos Warlock that allows you to summon demons from beyond the Nether. It's a change that is iconic to demonology, but is even cooler for destruction because of how those demons will affect some of your basic abilities. Ellen's Chosen is another hero spec that actually makes Arcane Bear and a full Arcane Boomkin a real possibility, with a lot of strong and exciting gameplay options and synergies during the early preview. Not all the talents have been seen as that good so far though, but they are listening to feedback, and which is super important, so they're making changes, and that should be highlighted. Having a character's grow power without a borrowed power system is a great idea going forward. And the fact that they're focusing on these hero talents early, listening to feedback, making changes as early as possible, even before we get the alpha of the War Within, is also a good thing that will likely result in them being a general success. But if given the choice though, for many players, especially within our community, they would love for that fantasy, the visual aspect and the feel, as well as the actual talents, the gameplay side of things. If they can be separate, and you could pick between one of them, it'd be better if they were separate. Take for example, the Protection Warrior hero spec of Mountain Thane versus the Colossus. For Mountain Thane, you'll get visual lightning effects. Your avatar has a blue hue, you have a lightning leap, a lightning stormbolt, and a lightning thunderclap. Visually, Colossus is different, has more of an orange hue towards its avatar ability, and there's now a bit of a shockwave whenever you use the thunderclap, just being able to shockwave enemies back just with the raw strength of your warrior. What if you were to take the visuals, the lightning visuals of a Mountain Thane, but allow the player to use the Colossus Demolish talent kit? Or take that Colossus orange avatar visual and the physical strength aspects of it, but allow the player to use the natural damage of the Mountain Thane talents. And what if Blizzard essentially could separate the gameplay and the visual, letting players pick between both? And they could even do some cool things to really make players feel separate. Death Knights, for example, that are still in lane, you could do things like give them red eyes instead of the regular Death Knight blue eyes, and some Venthyr-esque ability in terms of just cosmetics, but not actual gameplay changes. But for Dark Rangers, maybe they could let him summon dark, undead pets instead of normal beasts out of the wild as beast mastery, and allow their arcane shots to have more of a shadowy visual rather than an arcane visual, but essentially be the same mechanic and gameplay. I think there's a lot of things you could do to make a player feel like their own fantasy character, but while keeping the gameplay aspects separate, so that at the end of the day players can have that fantasy, the visual, the feel, the flavor of a lot of their abilities to match their style of warrior, their type of a hunter, their version of a rogue, compared to the gameplay aspects, which are always going to be subject to tuning, with one or the other likely being stronger in some situations. Even if there's like a 1% difference in performance in all types of content like raids, dungeons, single target, AoE, PvP, short fights, long fights, even if there's like a slight difference in terms of performance, a lot of players will lean towards the performance rather than the flavor. But if you were to separate the flavor and the actual gameplay choices apart from each other, I feel like you could actually please both crowds. But for now, that's going to be all of the ways that the War Within could be even better, with the community giving ideas of how they could make all of the major features of the expansion that much more interesting. I want to thank all of you so much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Particularly, I want to hear what are your thoughts about some of these community suggestions, or how would you modify some of the suggestions in order to make the War Within a better overall experience. As per usual, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And as always, in the description of every single video and live stream, we have a link to our Discord community channel. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly in case you want to let me know what you thought about this video, or hang out with the rest of the community to discuss some of the upcoming changes. Join our Discord to become part of the community. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.